the top three, the trio, for inviting me to deliver this training. I just want to acknowledge our Division G Director, Michelle Westgate, who's in the room, and all the other division directors as well, and my partner in crime, Michelle, who will be delivering the hybrid meetings training in just a few minutes after I'm finished the club culture presentation. This is an interactive training. I am going to invite you to keep your cameras on if you are able, and also to chime in with any questions and thoughts as we progress during the training. I am the president of Mainline Speaks and also the area director for G72. And in my little over 2 years as a Toastmaster, I definitely have some thoughts about what it means to create a positive, affirming, encouraging club culture. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you tonight. So let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, can everybody see that? Thumbs up. All right, so as you all know, we will be recording this meeting, and if you are on the meeting and you prefer not to be seen, it is your option to definitely turn your camera off. We may be posting these trainings or snippets of it online. You may also rename yourself or just put your initials if you care to. So as all of you know by now, District 38 has a brand new theme and motto, many voices, one team. And this training is all about not just creating a club culture, but creating a strong club culture. And I want to share with you the idea of what it really means to prioritize relationships while also achieving deliverables. So tonight we have a packed agenda. We're going to actually be talking about several things, and we're going to start with desired outcomes. We'll review the mission. We'll talk a little bit about what is culture, conflicts in culture. We'll have questions to ponder and so forth. And then at the very end, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. But throughout, I'll be asking you to chime in and just contribute thoughts as we go through. So the desired outcomes for tonight's training, I thought about actually two, one being a little more practical, one being a little bit more aspirational. The practical outcome, the desired outcome, is that you'll leave with the ability to basically articulate the importance of cultivating a positive, encouraging, and affirming club culture. I don't think that that's world changing, right? But the aspirational desired outcome is that you'll leave with a desire and an intention to leverage some of the tools and some of the things that we talk about tonight, resources, philosophies that are shared in this training, to implement and contribute to a continuous cultivation of a positive, encouraging, and affirming club culture. So we talk a lot about our mission statements. We have our TI mission statement, our Toastmasters International mission statement. We have our district mission statement. We have our club mission statement. And the first thing that I'd like to do, if you want to come off mute or if you want to put it in the chat, I highlighted some words in the TI mission statement, the district mission statement, and the club mission statement that I believe really speak to how we do what we do and kind of why we do it. The whole idea of empowering, supporting, achieving positive, greater self-confidence, personal growth. I would like for you to share what you think all of these words have in common for you as a club officer with Toastmasters. And if you could share that in the chat, or if you could come off mute, that would be really helpful.
Hey, Renee, it's Michelle.
Yes.
Support jumped right out at me. We support each other as officers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Michelle. And to be able to prioritize that, right? To be able to know that that's something that sort of works its way through all of the mission statements in so many ways is so important. I see some positive growth, intentional acts to help others, helping others. Toastmasters empowered me to move toward my dreams. Exactly. And that's what we want to be able to keep in mind as leaders in Toastmasters. So as we move to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what is club culture, because I would be remiss to do a training about club culture if we didn't define it, right? So what is club culture to you? Shout out some words, put it in the chat, whatever feels good to you. How you feel during a meeting, the essence of how people connect in the club, relationship, meeting norms, makes club unique, environment.
Hi,
Exactly.
this is Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
I think club culture is providing a safe environment for everyone and anyone, regardless of where you come from, where you're going, who you are, what you are.
Catherine, that is one of the best answers, because when you think about safety, there's like a release, right? Like I'm good here. I'm going to achieve my goals. I'm going to be able to reach the heights that so many of us strive for, right? Is that what you mean when you say safety, Catherine?
Yes, and that everyone is using the word support. Everyone is supportive of wherever you're coming from, whatever you have to give, whatever you can give, and where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and everyone supports and builds on those and helps people, empowers people to become more confident and more effective speakers, and the safe environment you create allows them to feel secure and build that confidence without having to step outside and say, okay, I got to do this, and this is where I'm going to become more confident. I have it right here in this Toastmasters group.
That's so good. And also the safety to make mistakes, right?
Yes.
Because it's not always going to be perfect the first, second, third, or 50th time, right? So what is club culture? So we have a few answers here. Values, customs, traditions, meanings, behaviors, mood, norms, beliefs, habits, environment. And it's up to us really to be able to establish all of these things, and included in that is definitely the idea of safety. But what happens when there's conflict in club culture? What happens when we have challenges with relationship versus deliverable? And I think all of us can think about being able to reach certain goals or wanting to reach certain goals, and not necessarily being able to reach those goals maybe as quickly as we want to, and feeling the pressure of that, right? So when you think about relationship, it's the way two or more people or groups regard and behave with each other. When you think about deliverables, it's a tangible action item that must be submitted to complete a project. So what happens when those two things collide? Has anybody ever experienced that? Any comments on that?
I'd like to try.
Yes, Sybil.
When we were stationed in South Korea, which is actually where I came into Toastmasters at, it was different because once we had this very even killed group, we empowered one another, we supported one another, we celebrated one another, and we all grew equally. But the moment that there was a shift in the leadership, suddenly it was a dictatorship instead of a relationship. And then suddenly nobody was excelling. People were
Mm.
falling off, they were quitting, or they were just stagnant.
And Sybil, if I could just pick that apart a little bit, what was the feeling among the people who were there about how to pick up the pieces?
Well, some literally just gave up. But see, the
Hmm.
thing is, we were a military Toastmaster, so it's a little bit different. And then also being there, you had 1 minute it was pretty much all Air Force, which is more relaxed and easygoing. Then suddenly Army was in, and then that Army person was like, "Oh, you're gonna do it my way." Like if they were drill sergeants, like, "Wait a minute, we paid to be here. We are equal. We're members. Your rank is left at the door." But it gave you this thing of being browbeaten, and suddenly people, and because we pay to be Toastmasters, because we make that decision that, hey, I'm coming in here to get what I need to take it and run with it, suddenly people, like I say, they gave up.
Yeah.
Me, I'm older, I'm a grandmother. My mindset was, I took a bus for 4 hours, I'm sleeping in a hotel for the night to be here. You're going to back up.
Hmm.
But most of them, especially the active duty people, especially when you're talking about airmen, they were powerless.
Hmm. So it sounds to me like the leaders sacrificed the relationships in order to prioritize the deliverables, right? So when that happens, there's all kinds of dissension can happen in a club. And I just want to invite you to think about this next thought, this next idea of which do you think is more important? Prioritizing a relationship or achieving the deliverables? Which do you think is the most important? And you can only choose one, A or B, prioritizing relationships or achieving deliverables. And you can just put your answer in the chat, A or B. I'm seeing a lot of A, couple B. I'm seeing some people say both. A lot of A, but my boss says B. That's good. Relationship. B occurs naturally. Yeah. A, with positive relationships, you can achieve the deliverables. Both. Okay. Depends on the goal. Okay. Good responses. Okay. So there is a leadership guru. His name is Peter Drucker. Has anyone heard of Peter Drucker? He has this famous quote where he says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And when I say that quote out loud, what does that say to you? How does that resonate with you? What does that mean to you?
It's important to have your culture together before you do anything, because otherwise you're gonna just have a mess. So the culture of the club will, and resolve it first thing in the morning. When
Yeah.
breakfast is, start of the day. That's how I
Yes.
see it.
I love that. That's great, Juanita. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts about Peter Drucker's quote?
Yes, it actually reminds me of the quote, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together," right?
Mhm.
Because we can get more done as a team. And so if we have a great culture, then you're creating a space where people want to do well, people want to have great outcomes. And so you typically have better outcomes if people feel good about being there.
Exactly. And that is Anissa. Thank you so much, Anissa. Culture is the star of the show, bar none. And strategy, according to Drucker and many other leaders, is and supposed to be in a supporting role. Human factor is really the king, and managing stress and pressure is absolutely essential. And what that means is that grace under fire is necessary, especially for leaders in this space. And we're all leaders in one respect or another. But the most important thing is that when you prioritize culture, You're prioritizing humanity. Do you agree with that? Not agree with that? What are your thoughts about that? Any thoughts about prioritizing culture equaling prioritizing humanity?
Hi, this is Kim.
Hi, Kim.
I agree that they're very equal. People
Mhm,
have to feel like people and they have to be respected. And if they
mhm.
don't have that respect or they don't feel respected, they're not going to put their best foot forward and they're going to peace out. So that's a huge part of being a team or a club or whatever the case might be.
And it's helpful for retention, right? To be able to keep people in the club and to be able to make sure that they are receiving their individual needs and achieving their individual goals so that it will factor into our collective goals as well.
Renee, there's a question in the chat. What do
Oh,
you
sure.
mean by grace under fire?
Okay, so I'm going to open that up to the room. I have my definition of what grace under fire is, and I would love to hear any input on what you might think it means to you. And then I'll share my definition with you. What are your thoughts of grace under fire?
Hi, this is Catherine again.
Hi, Catherine.
When you say grace under fire, I think of having the tact, the empathy, the mental capacity to handle stress, adversity, something that goes against anything that you feel or believe, but having that grace or that tact to stand up to it. So we're constantly under fire or barraged by people being negative or people saying you didn't do this or whatever, but it's having that mental awareness to accept that and to move forward with it and to look at things maybe more positively.
That's great, Catherine. And I couldn't have said it better myself. When I think of grace, I think of calm. I think of patience, balance, peace, being centered. And even when things are coming at you and there's many stressors and many things that you have to navigate and juggle, being able to see the trajectory and being able to see the big picture so that you can make decisions that are best not only for the club, but for the organization as a whole. Does that answer the question about grace under fire?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions in the chat, Rhonda, before I move on?
No, just a lot of comments. There's a lot of vitality in the chat, so that's a good thing.
Okay, great. Let's see what we got here. Let's see. I think by prioritizing people, you build the club culture. Very good. Being compassionate despite the environment, demands, and tasks, I think is important, definitely. And let's see what else we got here. Keeping emotions in check when things don't go as planned, being patient and kind under pressure, not losing it, accepting that it is what it is. Sometimes we don't like that phrase, but it helps, right? Poise, ability to face challenges with confidence. No matter the situation, you as the leader must remain calm and focused and hearing the need hidden in the bark. Okay, gotcha. All right. So let's move on to the next slide and a purpose-driven culture. So when we think about club culture, we also think about, or I think about the idea of having a purpose, having a connection to the mission and a connection to the vision of being a Toastmaster and also what it means to operate effectively on the club level. So there's a two-pronged approach. One is formulated clearly and one is defined clearly. So the first really has to do with the vision, which is to create or devise methodically a strategy or a proposal. So that's sort of like the big picture. Like, what is it that you want to accomplish? What do you want to feel when you walk into your club meeting? What is the vision? Why does the club exist? These are some questions that you can ask yourself. What makes the club unique? What problem will my specific club solve? And we all think sometimes that being a Toastmaster club, we have unique characteristics. So Mainline Speaks may not be like the Princeton Club. There's differences in culture, there's differences in the way they do things. But what is it about the way you do those things that makes you special? And as a result, when you think about that big picture, how can that big picture begin to attract people to your club? And then when you think about defining clearly, we think about the mission. So it gets a little more granular. It gets a little bit more in the detail. So what is the club mission? How will you accomplish your purpose? What are the services that you uniquely provide? How do you describe your unique value proposition? So these are some questions that you can think about asking yourself just to kind of get a sense of how your club is special and what you bring to the table as a unique local club. Any questions on that slide or thoughts? All right. Now, when we think about club culture, your unique club culture, there are a few ideas that come to mind for me. And the first one I always think about is the fun factor. How much fun is it to be a Toastmaster at your specific club? What is it about the hospitality that makes you unique? Is it organized and professional? Do the officers set a positive example? What is it about the example that they set that makes that specific officer unique and a model for others in the club? How are the evaluations? Are they supportive? Are they reductive? Do they encourage and inspire? Do they offer constructive feedback? How much diversity do you have in your club? How are you doing with your milestones? What are some of the rules that are set up that are working and what rules are not working? What rituals and customs have been in place for years, months, and might need to be revisited? And what I would invite you to do is think about all of these things and evaluate your club using a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, and really decide where you think you are and where you might want to grow and improve. So creating a high performance culture is something that I think the majority of our clubs want to do. We want to be able to set high standards and model them not only within the club, but throughout the Toastmasters organization. We want to promote self-leadership. And when I say self-leadership, I really emphasize that because the idea is that if you can't lead yourself, you're going to have a really hard time leading others, right? So to be able to really effectively lead yourself and to be able to know yourself is such an important quality of a leader. Promoting end-to-end ownership. This is something that I believe that many of us are embracing and should continue to embrace. And that's when there's an idea, when there's a project, to have one person who's ultimately responsible for end-to-end ownership of that project. Now, that person might be able to delegate responsibilities, but if it's, say it's an open house, choose one person who is ideally responsible for that project. so that you can get reports and you can know where you are in terms of the progress of the project from that one individual. And living the FIRE principle, this is something that these are some things that I found on the Toastmasters International website. And the FIRE principle, I had never heard of that before. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of it, but the FIRE principle is really about putting out small fires before they become infernos. So it's that whole idea of nipping it at the bud. And there is a quote that I really love that talks about what leaders tolerate. And it says, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. So if you are in a club culture that is mean-spirited with your evaluations, or if you're in a club culture that is cliquish, these are the kinds of things that leaders need to nip in the bud, right? To be able to infuse that positive, affirming, encouraging culture that we advocate for with Toastmasters. And then, of course, communicating frequently. I mean, we're Toastmasters, right? So we have no excuse to not communicate on a frequent basis. And then as we continue thinking about creating a high performance culture, training together like we're doing now, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, engaging team members with feedback, regular and positively challenging the status quo. And there's this idea of continuous quality improvement that I believe that Toastmasters promotes from an international to a local level. And that's the one thing that I really appreciate about this organization, is the idea that just because it was that way last year and the year before and last week, we don't have to keep it that way. We can always be innovative, we can always change, and we can always grow and advance. And perfect example of that is how COVID forced us, right, to be able to have virtual meetings. And now we can't even imagine Toastmasters without virtual meetings. We're trying, so desperately to move away from it, but it's so ingrained in our culture now that we're not even sure whether we're going to be able to do that. And then also measuring your initiatives and figuring out if they're effective. So you may want to do surveys, you may want to do qualitative focus groups, you may just want to talk informally with people to get a sense of how people feel about voting for the best speaker every week. How do people feel about certain things that you have done traditionally for months and months and years? And as we talk about strategy and culture and how they coexist, I want to offer you an acronym. I happen, like Joe Smith, to love acronyms. And the acronym is CHESS. And I invite you to play chess, not checkers. Now, I don't know how many of you are chess players and how many of you are checkers players, but although both chess and checkers involve a modicum of strategy, and they also seem a little bit similar, research says that chess is more difficult. And I'm going to tell you why. Chess is more difficult because it involves far fewer moves and board combinations. I don't play chess, so I don't even think I know what that means. But if you play chess, then you know what I mean. So I'm going to invite you to play chess, not checkers. And basically what that means to me is that you get to decelerate so that you can accelerate. So slow down, take your time, and think about this CHESS acronym, which is compassion, humanity, empathy, sensitivity, and I believe it was Catherine who said safety. Prioritizing these 5 things I believe will make the difference in your club culture. And I believe also that it'll make a difference for you as an individual Toastmaster, and to be able to really meet not only the expectations of the mission, but also exceed goals and deliverables that you set for yourself and for the club. Any questions, insights, perspective, thoughts, or takeaways from anybody?
Renee,
Yes.
and I'm not saying this just because you're my president. Excellent, excellent presentation. Thank you so very much.
Oh, Juanita, thank
And
you.
we've had a discussion about learning new things and doing things differently. And so I must applaud you. And I definitely will have a different view about the things that we're going to be doing. So thank you very much.
You just made my night, Juanita. Sion Leary, DTM. The floor is open for any questions, comments, thoughts, insights, perspectives, anything.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, you covered what culture is, but what suggestions do you have in developing relationship in this virtual environment?
And when you say that, go ahead.
I just miss the relationships I had when I lived in Idaho and we had face-to-face meetings. I left and I'm back in the South, and even face-to-face, the culture is so different down here. And I kept searching online meetings until I was finally able to find a club in District 38 that gave a flip.
About in person.
Yes, but I'm in Texas. So the challenge is developing relationship in a virtual environment.
Why do you find it a challenge, Mary?
I think it is because when we met, when I was in Idaho and I was in a in-person club, we would meet during the week, one-on-one. We developed a relationship. We had socials where we went over each other's house. We had parties twice a year for the club, and we even invited other clubs. We spent time together outside of meetings. You can't how can you develop relationship without time invested?
Well,
people are so busy.
I can speak to that a little bit, Mary. When I personally, when I joined Mainline Speaks, I joined in the middle of a global pandemic in June 2020. So it was the height of COVID. And I literally, like, I'm seeing Juanita tonight on Zoom. I never even knew how tall she was, how thin she was. I never knew anything from the neck down for 2 years before we started having hybrid meetings. Yet there was a connection because of my commitment. I fell in love with Toastmasters because of Toastmasters like Juanita and others in the club who were just so dedicated and loved being a Toastmaster. And we literally never met for 2 years. But by the time I met them, I was like, it was amazing to see them in person. But I felt like we had already bonded, and we trusted each other, we knew each other, we worked together, we collaborated. And so I would invite you, based on my experience and the experience of so many others who joined during COVID, to get connected to a club, maybe that you could visit on occasion, but more importantly, that you can commit to, because on occasion you might be able to have talks offline, and you might be able to have Zoom lunches, and you might be able to, just do fun things that are really different because of our hybrid situation and our virtual situation. And maybe think about building that bond and building that relationship in spite of. Does that help?
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
Mary, I have to chime in and say that Renee wore a dress that was so gorgeous that I really loved it. And I said to her, I want that dress. And she said, she didn't know what I looked like yet. And then when we met, she was like, you couldn't fit it. It was a lie. She was a dress. She could have made it fit. But that was the thing. I never realized that we were so different in size, because, the way we show up on the screen. But you do have to work at it. And when you see someone who may be struggling or seeming like they're having trouble, just kind of reach out to them. We had, in another organization, we had a dinner party virtually. Everybody cooked their own dish, and then we shared it, how we did it. And then we had music, and we had a lot of fun. So just, keep looking for a club that you can sort of, bond with the person via and we've all decided that it takes something from you in terms of your stage presence when you're live. So now we have to get back to knowing our speeches rather than relying on having a teleprompter or whatever you use. So just keep working at it and don't give up. I've been a Toastmaster for ever. No, not really, over 12 years. I love Toastmasters.
Does that help, Mary?
And I developed this thing I say about our club. Does that help? We can't hear. I can't hear her.
Thank you.
You're welcome, dear. I think that's good, Rhonda, right?